but I kind of become the vessel for information when I do a reading. So thoughts and feelings feel familiar as if they're my own.
The Mercedes-Benz Interview Lounge.
Life After Death with Tyler Henry. It's on Netflix. I binged the whole thing. And you know what? It's just fascinating. And we have Tyler with us today. Tyler, thanks for coming on with us this morning.
Hello, I wouldn't have missed it. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Look, I don't know where to start. Let's start with this. Let's start with your gift. As a young child, you knew that you had something brewing in you. Something was simmering in your life, but you really couldn't identify exactly what it was. But you eventually figured it all out. Tell us about that process real quick.
Sure. Well, it definitely was a process. It started for me in April 2006. I was 10 years old, and I basically just woke up one night and had what can only be described as a knowingness that my grandmother was going to die. And at the time, it was really just something that was happening to me. I didn't really understand it as an ability, but unfortunately it came to pass as I went into the room to explain this feeling to my mom. And I was upset and relaying this to her, and we were interrupted by her phone ringing. And as she picked up her phone, it was the news from my dad that my grandmother had just died. So that was really the catalyst. But at that age, I didn't recognize that as something I could do. It just kind of was a one-off.
Right.
Wow.
So you're sitting there minding your own business, and out of nowhere, you're kind of slapped upside the head with things you feel, intuition. How do you describe what it's like when you get slapped upside the head with some of these things?
That's right. So the best way to describe it for me is really, at least in that initial case, it was like a memory that hadn't happened yet. So I was able to, in some ways, kind of glean that this occurrence either had happened or was going to happen, but it felt like it had already occurred. There was some degree of certainty, even though I couldn't understand the context around the feeling. And then equally, when I do readings, sometimes it'll feel like a song stuck in my head. Sometimes it'll just feel like a sense of familiarity. But I kind of become the vessel for information when I do a reading. So thoughts and feelings feel familiar as if they're my own. And that's kind of how I learn to navigate what's coming through.
And by the way, guys, West Coast is very familiar with Tyler because, you're based there, and a lot of celebrities want to spend time with you. And you have a waiting list that's, longer than long for people that want to spend time with you to talk to people they've lost in their lives, to see how they're doing, or to get closure with losing them. And the thing that makes me want to kind of give you a hug and go, hey, hold on. I feel like there are people always looking to get a reading from you at all times. And do you ever get to just relax and go, hey, can I just turn the closed sign around? I don't feel like hearing anything right now. Or is it something you can do? Is it something that's going to happen no matter what?
Sure. Well, I kind of liken what I do to a volume dial. So I can kind of turn down the noise, and then I have certain processes that I kind of consciously implement, to kind of turn on. So scribbling is a big way that I kind of start opening up and allowing myself to get impressions, so that when I'm not scribbling, I have a little bit of normalcy. I can go into the supermarket, do my shopping, and I'm not reading people. But I really kind of feel like what I do is very much a time and a place kind of thing. I never want to just spring what I do on somebody. Yeah. So I always prefer people, reach out to me.
So you've never stopped someone, like say you're shopping in the grocery store and something really comes through and you're like, I really have to tell this person shopping in the aisle next to me.
I have. And in all honesty, I used to practice quite a bit as a kid in public. I would walk up to strangers and I would share things with them. And very often we got some very strong emotional, reactions. And sometimes people looked at me like I had three heads, but typically it made sense. And so there were times where I would share information, but, I always want to just leave people better than I find them. You never know what headspace somebody is in when they are just going about their day-to-day shopping. So I really prefer people to reach out to me to receive a reading. I never want to kind of put it on someone who might not want the experience.
So when somebody on the opposite side of that comes to you and wants a reading, but maybe you see something in their past or their future that you are not comfortable talking about or think maybe they don't need to know, do you ever hold back some of that stuff from people?
I don't think that the future is set in stone. I kind of liken it to trajectories. So I think all in life is really just trajectory. To kind of give you an analogy, if you imagine throwing a Frisbee, if you threw a Frisbee in the air, about midway through, you kind of get an idea of where that Frisbee is likely to land. And so intuitive people, I think, kind of just get an idea of kind of where that Frisbee is projected to go or projected to go. And so I think that can give insight into the process. But When it comes to relaying bad news, there's a lot of times on my show where I've had to discuss difficult things. Alan Thicke, was a huge example with his serious health problems that came through. We've had to sometimes talk about difficult things, but all with the goal of trying to help provide clarity.
Right.
So if it was something like you knew I was going to get hit by a bus, would you tell me if I saw you right before I left?
I would say look both ways when you cross the street, because again, I don't believe in certainty. So I think that really we're just on different kind of trajectories is the word I like to use.
Chris Rock, someone's going to slap you tonight. I don't know.
I'm sensing a very tall man. Well, everyone's tall compared to Chris Rock.
That's true. By the way, we're talking to Tyler Henry, Life After Death with Tyler Henry. Of course, it's on Netflix. And I like I said, I could not help but sit there and just watch the entire series. Now, let me tell you what's great about it. Let me Tyler-splain to you. Not only do you see Tyler spending a lot of quality time with some beautiful, beautiful people and doing a session with them and connecting them with answers to questions that they really needed. But also you dive into your personal life too, your mom and her mom, right? And the family history. And there's a lot of personal things, you and your boyfriend. And it's so well done and so well thought out. And I'm sure you're the genius that made all the decisions and
I wish.
Oh, the editing, you're up all night editing. But it really is, what it does to me is you're not just a medium who shows up and starts talking about, your grandmother who passed away. You're a human being who's living his own life. You have your own struggles, your own challenges. And I just wanted to give you a hug during the entire thing because you come across as such a wonderful, wonderful, kind-hearted person. But that must take a toll after a while because you're putting yourself in the middle of a universe of communication between people you don't know and people you don't know, and it's a weird thing. How do you get through it? How do you stay grounded?
Well, first, I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, it's really an intense process when I do a reading, but even outside of readings, my job is me. So I'm always there. I'm always kind of carrying that weight. And I would say just, the element of grief that comes into it, it's very intense. I feel like even for every reading I do that resolves or maybe helps add a little clarity or provide a little healing, there's always going to be somebody to kind of replace that. And there's always going to be a demand there. So it can become sometimes like an uphill battle when it comes to grief and trying to kind of resolve that for people. But I'm very lucky to have a great support system. My mom and dad and boyfriend are all featured on the show. And you really see through it, how necessary of a support system they are for me because this work is intense. There's no off button entirely. And I really just do my best.
Well, you're dealing with a lot of emotions. I mean, when you're connecting someone with a lost loved one or whatever, they cry, they break down, and they're like, oh, you blow their mind, bringing the information out to them. And I hope that you're getting plenty of rest, drinking lots of water, and moisturizing your face.
That's right. I've got my bean water here, and I am good to go. Caffeine gets me through.
Right. Yeah, Gandhi, what's up?
Are you at this moment with the people in this room on the Zoom screen, are you feeling anything strange or interesting about anyone here, or does it even work that way?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm feeling a little sleepy, I'll tell you that much.
Okay.
But really my process is typically through scribbling. So when I scribble, I kind of open up and become hyper aware of really any changes that go on in my mind and my body. So to give clarification, I always say my sixth sense uses the other five senses to communicate. So I don't see dead people walking around. I basically just kind of get into an active daydream, and scribbling helps kind of facilitate that. So it's a repetitive process. It allows me to kind of tune in and kind of ignore my surroundings.
Good. So
gotcha.
you can take some time off, which is very well deserved.
Right.
Within reason, but there are exceptions, certainly. If anything comes through, if anyone busts in, I'll let you know.
But what about you? I mean, could someone sit down and have a session with you? Would you be open to that? I mean, I know you sort of dabble with this a little bit in the series, but I mean, yeah. I mean, or is it something you don't want to know more about? Some people don't want to know anything
I'm
beyond
that
what
kind
they
of
know.
way. That I prefer never to know. In fact, I don't see mediums anymore. I don't go get readings, that kind of thing. Not because I don't see the effectiveness, but just simply because I'm not at a place in my life where I need it. And so I think if you're in a place where you could use some direction, you maybe have some questions, you could use some validation, going to someone good who's going to validate that trajectory is great. But for me personally, I prefer not to know. I allow, the future to just kind of unravel as it's meant to go. And sometimes it's good to, have a little bit of insight into maybe what, things have, and then other times not so much.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes we can't handle the truth, as they say. By the way, Tyler Henry is here. Life After Death is, of course, on Netflix. And it will definitely change your life to watch what Tyler does and his very special gift and his really great way of, you have a wonderful bedside manner with the people that you're working with, because they are going through grief or they're going through some traumatic, awful crap, right? And you just kind of like, okay, it's going to be all right. We're going to get through this. You're really great at doing that. So congratulations to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. With this job, it doesn't come with a textbook. There's no school to go to learn the ins and outs of it. So a lot of what I do is just kind of self-trained, and I just try to do my best. And, in looking at readings, there's things I would do differently, but I just try to leave people better than I find them. And that resoundingly is always the goal.
Excellent. Well, look, thanks for your time. And we're going to make sure everyone listening to our show goes to watch yours. That's how it works.
I appreciate it.
And we'll invoice you for that. No problem.
That's right. I'll do a reading. We'll do a barter.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. You have a beautiful day, okay? Thanks for
Thank you,
Go
everyone.
back to bed.
you.
Go back to
I
bed.
am. Nighty night.
Bye, guys.
The Mercedes-Benz Interview Lounge.